Hey, May 22nd, this is take 15. We're trying to get through kids who just keep struggling, but someday we're going to eventually get there.
That's great. That'll never be me.
So, those of you, if you finished the test, I went through this morning and updated all of the stuff that was turned in as far as the extra credit crossword, as far as the test. If you're still taking them, that's fine. I'll still keep updating them each day. You have to give me about 24 hours. It's not an immediate thing, but I'll update it as you go. I was at the band concert last night, so cool, you guys who were there for that one. And again, things have been updated. Oh, and I'll go back to that. So on here, you've seen the front of my podium. The front of it is off and it's over there. You have today, tomorrow, Friday. If you are wanting to sign it, I already have the little squares drawn on there. So it's any of the 3 days coming up, you are more than welcome to. It does cost you 75 points, and you can't go below 25, so you'd have to have at least 100. But it does become that permanent part if that's the thing you want to do. If not, that's fine. Right, that's where the listening comes in again. Did I have anyone? Did you just roll your eyes at me? Anyone who is wanting to spend the points today, and I can get your choicey bits, and then what it'll be is on my desk, there's a little canister that has a whole bunch of Sharpies in it, and you're welcome to grab whichever Sharpies you want in there, and then choose whichever box that you want. So Sealand, I have you. Ramos, I have you. And then again, if you decide later, that's fine. All right. Then you're welcome to either today, tomorrow, Wednesday. You already paid, so you're welcome to do the thing. No, I mean earlier you were screaming.
It's because I didn't get it.
Yeah, no, I was well aware. And then for there, again, if you did not like your grade, you can retake it. It's on Skyward. And so each retake does drop you down by 2 points. And already the highest grade you get is a B+. It means it's going to drop you down to like a B. But if that raises grade, there you go. More power to you. Nice. So then that's why I was trying to get through this as speedily as possible today, tomorrow, Friday. I plan out the end of my year very purposefully. I used to not do this. For years, I used to show movies at the end of the school year, whether it be Outsiders and stuff like that. Agreed. But there's a reason why teachers show you movies at the end of the year. Two big reasons going into it. One is that we also have homework we have to do that we don't want to do. We have a whole bunch of paperwork that our bosses give us, and so if you guys watch a movie, we get a chance to get our homework done. The other part of it is, you may have picked up from the beginning of class, y'all are kind of crazy and spazzy as we get towards the end, and the less we have to deal with you, the easier it makes it on us. So for years, that's what I would do at the end of every class period, or at the end of every school year. And then things slowly started to change, which is a little bit of the story I'm going to give you now. And just like Joey was going to have to wait to the end of class. So when I was a kid, way back during dinosaur times, I had teachers I liked, but not ones like I was really excited about, and definitely not ones I would talk to in the hallways or go back and talk to. So that's all I knew going through all of my teaching years. My first, second year of teaching, pretty normal. And then one day, it was either my second or third year of teaching, I don't remember. My desk has been over in that area ever since I've been in this room. And I remember sitting at my desk, and there was a knock on my door after school. Door opened, and it was an 8th grader who came in. And I was like, hey, what's up? Like, you're not in my class anymore. They're like, hey, I'm waiting for my mom to pick me up. I was like, can I just come in and wait in here? And I was like, okay. And they sat in little chairs in front of my desk. And the kid just started talking to me, like about life, how things had been since they'd been in my room the previous year, about how teachers were, about home life. And it was weird because I'd never talked to a kid before. I'd only ever taught kids. I'd never just sat and talked to a kid. And it was kind of nice, like actually interacting with a kid like they were an actual human. And he sat there for like a half hour or so just talking about stuff. And he was like, see you later. And I was like, okay. And then he walked out, and I was like, that's weird. I never did that when I was a kid. I'd never heard about that happening. So the next day, and I was teaching like 7th graders, I just did a timeout in the middle of class. I was like, timeout. I'm like, something weird happened yesterday. I'm like, what? And I was like, I was sitting at my desk and knocked on the door and I told him the story about the 8th grader coming in. And I was like, he talked to me for like a half hour and he left. And I was like, that's weird, isn't it? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, is that something you guys have done? They're like, no. And I'm like, that's not something I've ever done before either. And I was like, it kind of freaked me. I was like, it was kind of fun. It was neat, but I've never done that before. And I was like, all right. So I was going to go back to teaching. There's a kid that was sitting over there. And he raised his hand. And I go, yeah? And he goes, can anyone do that? I go, can anyone do what? He goes, come in and talk to you. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, why would I ever turn away a kid who wants to come talk to me? I'm like, of course. I'm like, I just didn't think it would ever happen. So over the course of the next year or so, I would have 8th graders who would come in after school and talk to me and catch up, and I enjoyed it. It made teaching more fun for me because it wasn't just getting to know 7th graders, but getting to see how your lives continue made teaching more meaningful for me. And then one day it changed again. I was sitting at my desk, knock on the door. I was like, oh, yeah, open it. And in came not an 8th grader, but a kid I hadn't seen in 3 years. This was like my 6th or 7th year of teaching. And this kid came in and I was like, hey? And he was like, hey, can I come in and talk? And I'm like, you don't go to school here. And he was like, I know. And I'm like, why are you here? And he was like, well, so this wall over here used to be a giant bulletin board. I used to fill it with pictures of me when I was in junior high and high school and early teaching. I had a picture of my first car on there. It was like this big purple Pontiac Grand Am. There's like a big Grimace mobile. It was great. So kids knew my car in the parking lot. And he was like, I saw your car in the parking lot, the purple one. Is that still yours? And I'm like, who else is going to drive a purple car? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, I saw your car. And he was like, I got my license a couple months ago and I saw it. And I was like, can I come in and talk? And I was like, okay. And he came in and again, I just caught up with this kid and we just sort of talked about things. And I was like, that's crazy that not only an 8th grader would come back to talk to me, but a kid I had not seen in 3 years came back to talk to me. But again, it was cool. It was a kid I stayed in contact with throughout 8th grade. And then he was like, hey, can I come back again sometime? And I'm like, okay. And he left. And again, I told my 7th graders, I was like, weird thing happened. And I'm like, 8th graders, if I come back, I was like, a kid drove to the school and saw me. I'm like, that's weird. I'm like, that's weird. And I was like, if you guys ever get to high school and you really want to come see me, you're welcome to. And again, didn't think much about it. So over the next couple of years, I would have high school kids who would just come back and talk to me, 8th graders, high school kids, stuff like that. And I loved it. It made teaching fun. And one day, things changed. I had a 7th grader by the name of Clayton. This is Clayton. And Clayton was in my 5th period class, and Clayton was something else. Clayton was a wee little lad, just a wee little guy.
Like
Shut up, Bree.
And he tried hard not to lose his points all the time in class. I noticed the kid over there losing points because he attacked you. I'm well aware. I know who to charge points to. Come on.
Are you going to charge me points?
No, you were being good.
Okay.
He's trying to. And Clayton was a bit on the ADHD side and a little on the spazzy side. He spent a lot of his time running around my classroom. But one of the things that entertained me about him was he embraced who he was. Like, he never cared what other people thought about him. One of the things that I remember, because in my 5th period used to be when we would do like watching CNN or the Channel 1 and stuff like that. And so he would run around my room, but he would go to Goodwill and go to the little kids section and buy his t-shirts. And so he would come in wearing like Tonka truck shirts. And he would brag about his outfits, and other kids would like, is that a Tonka? And he's like, it is a Tonka. And he's like, I'm a big boy. And I was like, you are a special kid. And then throughout 8th grade, he was a kid that would come back and talk to me on occasion, enough that I knew he did not have a good home life. He did not get along with his parents and stuff like that. He was still very short. And then he left 8th grade, and I was like, all right, not a problem. I was like, not planning on ever running into that kid again. But until I'd see him like at football games when I was at the high school, and he'd wave to me and stuff like that. His junior year, so it's been 3 years since he'd been at our school, knock on my door, and opens it, and in walks Clayton. Taller, older, more mature looking, but also looking really sad, like something was up. And I was like, Clayton, what's going on, kid? And he came in and just like walked in and sat down. And I'm like, ooh, okay. I'm like, well, what's up? He goes, can we talk? And I'm like, and I thought that's what we were getting ready to do. And he goes, no, can we talk? And I was like, oh, we're going to have a talk. And And I go, okay, what's up? He goes, I got arrested last week. And I was like, oh, we're gonna have one of those talks. And he goes, I go, what happened? He goes, well, you know the Best Buy up in Noblesville? I go, yeah. And he goes, so I've been smoking pot for about a year now. And I was like, oh, we're gonna have one of these talks. And I'm like, that's a first for me as a teacher. They did not cover this in classes. And I was like, uh-huh. And he was like, so I was behind the Best Buy, and I was in my car, and I had to fight with my dad, and I was in there, and cops pulled up behind me, and full on, like, pulled me out of the car, arrested me, and he was like, and that was last week, and now my dad's threatening to kick me out of the house, and he's like, I'm on probation, I had to go to court, and the kids at school know, and he was like, I think I'm going to drop out, because I can't keep going through all this. And I'm like, I was not ready for this. I'm like, that is way more than I was ready for. And so I was doing my best to try and help Clayton adjust to the choices he made. I remember he just kept saying, he's like, you don't understand, Mr. Brovicast, this ends, you don't come back from this. He's like, I'm a junior in high school and I got arrested. He's like, you don't recover from that. And I was like, Clayton, it's not the end of the world. He's like, you don't understand. So finally, for the first time ever, I went, I do, because I got arrested in high school. And he went, and looked at me, and I was like, I've never told anyone this story before, and I'd never planned on telling anyone the story. I planned on dying with this story, but I liked Clayton, and he looked like he was hurting, so I told him the story that I'll end up telling you guys tomorrow about the time I got arrested in high school. And I was like, it sucked, and it changed my life, and it definitely impacted who I am, but I learned from it, and it was like, you'll do the same thing. It's not going to kill you. I was like, you don't drop out from it. I was like, you heal from it. And he was like, all right. He was like, thank you. And so he and I stayed in contact all throughout the rest of high school and college. He's actually now an insurance agent, ironically at his dad's company. And so it was good. And about 2 years later, I had another girl who'd come to my class by the name of Lindsay. Her nickname was Limpy, because her name was Lindsay Marie, and her last name started with P. So I called her LMP, or just Limpy. And I taught her older sister, and I taught her younger brother, and I liked the family, but the family was kind of messed up. They were really rich, and so they did not spend much time with their kids at all, and their kids kind of grew up on their own because they got everything they wanted, and their parents was like he was like the lawyer for the Colts, Pacers, for the sports teams, so he was never around. So I stayed in contact with her because I really liked her all throughout junior high, and then high school she'd come back on occasion and talk to me. One day, she came in to talk to me, and she was like, can we talk? And I'm like, talk? She goes, talk. And I was like, okay. I'm like, have a seat. And she was like, I got arrested last month. And I was like, okay. I was like, what happened? And so she just explained to me that she was out with friends, and they were at the mall in Castleton, and she shoplifted, and her friend got caught, and she was going through, she's like, you don't understand what happens? And I'm like, I'm ready for this. And I'm like, I have a story for you. And so I told her the story about me getting arrested. And at the end of it, she goes, that was actually really helpful. She was like, I really could have used that story when I was in junior high because I was going through some stuff, and that would have helped me. And I was like, yeah, I'm not telling stories to my junior high kids about me getting arrested because I would like to keep my job. So, no. But Limpy was persistent. She was a good kid. Made a bad choice, but was a good kid. And so she just would send me emails over the course of that year, and she was like, I really think this is something you should consider. So that into that year, I had a class I was worried about because of some of the choices they were making, and I feared the path that they were on, which is the talk we're going to have next Tuesday. And so I decided that that was the year I was going to try. And so I told that story to one of my classes at the end of the year. I was like, I'm worried about you guys, and I want you to sort of learn from one of my past choices. So I told them it wasn't actually that story, it was a slightly different story, but I told them that story, and they were like jaw-dropped staring at me the entire time. And then of course I had kids in other classes like, why didn't you tell us the story? And I'm like, well, because I don't worry about you guys as much. Like, well, worry about us. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I started telling my other classes the stories, and it sort of spread, where the next year, those 8th graders were like, are you going to tell the kids the story this year? And I was like, that was a one-time thing. I'm like, no, you have to. And so the next year I ended up telling 2 stories, and it sort of expanded. And I really thought it was just going to be like 2 stories, until again, high school kids came back to talk to me. And what would happen is they were like, of all the things that you told us when we were in your class, like, your stories at the end of the year sort of had the biggest impact on me. And so I realized that I was going to start changing how I taught, which goes back to last Friday's conversation about how I started changing my way of teaching, where I focused more on responsibility and making you guys better people rather than English. So you're going to find this next statement a little ironic after what happened on 2 days ago. But I set up my whole year to earn your trust. I know. So what I mean by that is, not like trust, but as an adult, I would not have wanted to have most of my teachers spend the end of a school year telling stories. And if you had most of your teachers go, hey, I want to spend a day telling you stories about my childhood, you would be like, oh, I'm sick, can I go to the nurse? And you would leave. So the fact that I have you guys willing to listen was my way of earning your trust. And quite honestly, it's not for today, tomorrow, or Friday. Those are going to be entertaining stories, but my goal with these next 3 days is, I told you the other day that I'm not going to lie to you anymore. Hands down truth. I won't be lying to you anymore for the rest of the time you guys know me till the day you stop talking to me. We have crossed that threshold where you get to see the different side of me. This is the part where my goal is I want to show you my true self, my emotions, and what made me who I am. Made me become the person I am. There were 3 major times in my life where I screwed up, where I thought it was going to end who I was, where I thought it was going to be a thing I can't come back from. And that's what my students have told me was impactful, because a lot of times kids screw up and do a thing and think that there's no coming back from it. And I don't want you guys to believe that. So I want you to listen to what happened to me to help you. Then my goal is Tuesday, that will come back after the 3-day weekend. That's my big story. That's the one that I want to stay with you. These 3 days are just to sort of let you know who I am so that Tuesday has weight. And I want Tuesday to sort of stick with you. Next Wednesday, the last day, I have one last story for you. But that's going to be, here's how it works. Today's story is a fun story. You get to laugh at me, and it's going to be entertaining, and it's all kinds of a high point. Tomorrow's story is depressing. It makes me sad, and it's not an easy story to tell. Bad things happen. And then Friday's story, we go back up to happy times, because Friday's story gets to be entertaining again. And then Tuesdays, we go back down to depressing emotion things. And then Wednesday, we go back up again, because it's me getting into a fight when I was in the 8th grade. And I get to tell you actual fight, like throwing punches and blood and all that. And I get to tell you all about that story on Wednesday, and it is all kinds of entertaining. So that is how we sort of finished out the year. So, let's begin my first story about the first time I really screwed up when I was in 2nd grade.
2nd grade is crazy, bro.
I was an advanced child that didn't want to wait till they were an adult to start their criminal record. I wanted to get my criminal record started as quickly as possible. So I actually took my own 2 daughters when they were in junior high. I said, who wants to go take a tour of Dad's old criminal locations? And of course, like any children, they said, us. So I actually took them on a tour and took pictures of all the actual locations while I told them these stories. So these are all photographs of the actual places where these things happened. So this story is in the summertime, between me going in from 2nd into 3rd grade. And I have a younger brother, Nick, who's 2 years younger than me, so he was kindergarten going into 1st grade. I have always been a tall, skinny twig of a child. Like if you take pipe cleaners and put them together, like when you're a little kid, that's me. My brother grew up as a bowling ball. He was a little round thing with little legs on the bottom of it, like Jason from the book. But he also did this thing in high school called hitting puberty, where he got really tall, thin, and good looking and shot way past me. But when he was younger, I got to make fun of him because you could roll him down. But we also hung out with a kid in our neighborhood who was an older kid who turned out to be a little bit of a bad influence. Now, when I say older kid, he was in 4th grade. But when you're in, I know you're like, were you hanging around like 18-year-old? No. But when you're in 2nd grade and you're hanging out with a kid at the top of the elementary school, that's a big kid. And I'm like, he's almost an adult. And so we got to hang out with him because in the neighborhood, you kind of hang out with who's nearby. He was nearby. And he wasn't a bad kid. He just was probably not as disciplined as he should be. So we were riding our bikes around our neighborhood, and we happened to be riding past this house when the fourth grader, and I don't remember his name. I can remember his face, but I can't remember his name because I didn't hang out with him after the summer. And so we were riding on the little sidewalk past this house, and the windows were open on this house. And he could see in there, and he's like, I don't think there's any furniture in that house. I'm like, no, all houses have furniture. That's stupid. And he goes, no, I really don't think there's furniture. He was like, I'm going to go check. And I'm like, I'm not. So we parked our bikes here, and he got up and ran up and peeked in the windows. And I'm like, you're going to get in trouble. And he looked in there, he's like a little, he's like, huh? He's like, there's no furniture. This house is empty. And I was like, there's no such thing as an empty house. As a second grader, I had no idea. So I ran up and I'm like, holy cow, like this house is empty. There's nothing in there. He goes, let's go inside. And I went, okay, this kid knows what he's talking about. So we went over to the front door and it was locked because the owners weren't idiots. Now, looking back on it, obviously they were selling the house, but at the time, I'm like, who has empty houses? But from here, you could see through the house, through the kitchen, and they had a big sliding glass door in the back. And he was like, let's go to the back door. And I'm like, this kid knows what he's talking about, let's do it. So, and I don't have pictures of the back because I thought that would be creepy if I walked around their house taking pictures, and I didn't want to get arrested again, so use your imagination. So we went around the back of the house, but they had a big wooden fence. Well, big to me, I think it was like this tall. But it was tall enough that we couldn't just climb it. And we went around, and the back gate of the fence was locked, and we're like, all right, we can't get in. But before we left, they had, you guys see those big green metal boxes in neighborhoods, like the electrical humming box? They had one in their backyard, between their yard and the next one, but it was close enough to their fence that we found out we could get on it, go all the way to the edge, run as fast as we could, and then jump like little squirrels, and we could land onto the fence, and just go, and we could climb up the back of it, and then drop on the other side. Geniuses. And then we went over the sliding glass door, and it was still locked, because again, they weren't idiots. And so we went ahead and like, all right, well, that's out of luck. And so we went out the door, the little gate, and opened it, and we were walking around this side of the house, and we could see here. And as we're walking by, he looks down and sees these little windows that are at the bottom part of the house. They look like these little windows like that.
Oh yeah, I have them.
Now, there's three different ways, now that I'm an adult, I know this, there's three different ways you have a house. You have what's called one that has a basement, where you have like the whole bottom part, but you also have what's called a slab, which is where your house is just flat against the ground. But then there's one in between where you have what's called a crawl space, which is like a little area that's about this big for like workmen to get in there, like to fix your wiring and plumbing. This house had a crawl space with these little windows, and it had just a little area between the house and the ground where you could crawl between. So the fourth grader is like, and was able to open up the window. He was like, I think we can get in. And I'm like, good luck, that looks scary. There's dirt and spiders right there, not happening. But the fourth grader was bigger than us, and he was kind of a husky boy. And so he couldn't get in there. He was like, I can't get into it. He's like, one of you is going to have to go. And I'm like, no, scared of spiders. So I did what any older sibling would do. I looked at my younger brother, and I said, Nick, go in there. And my younger brother countered with the best argument of all, which was crying and rocking into a ball, going, no, 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 no. And I'm like,
Perfect
fine.
ball.
Yeah, I was like, bullet. And so that's where they looked at me, and there was this thing called peer pressure, where the fourth grader was like, I bet you could go in there. And I'm like, Twiggy boy, go! And so I went down there, and I was like, yeah, like a little worm, and I was able to crawl into it and get all the way, so I was like halfway through. I hated it because there were like little spider webs going past my face. I could see bugs down there. I was like a pansy little boy at the time. So much better now. And so I got in there and I was like, I can't see anything. I'm like, it's darkness everywhere. I'm like, I don't think there's any way into the house. He's like, are you sure? And I'm like, I'm looking around, it's dark. Except for like, I could see like one line of gold, like the sunlight was hitting the edges of the siding. So I could see like a line of gold outlining it. I'm like, I just see like an edging and that's it. That's all. He's like, all right, well, then come on back. And I'm like, oh, thank God. So I'm like, and as I'm scooting back, to this day, I have no idea why this timed out the way it did. But as I'm scooting back, all of a sudden, a beam of light just goes, boom, like 12 feet in front of me. Just like all of a sudden, the ceiling or the floor of the house opened up, and it was like sunlight just shined down like you would see in movies. And it was like, oh, and I'm like, there's light. And he goes, what? I'm like, there's the hole in the roof, and there's light coming through. And he goes, do you think you can get through it? And I went, yeah. And he was like, well, then go through it. And I'm like, okay. He's like pushing my feet, and I'm like, ah, yeah. And so I'm like, I can do it. I'm a big boy. I'm a big boy. I'm a big boy. And so I'm crawling through, like little spider webs are going past me, and I'm like, just ignore him, just ignore him. And I get to the middle of the house-ish, and I flip over and look up, and like ceiling, there was just like a square that was just missing. And I could look up, and there was machinery above me, but it was inside the house. I'm like, I think I can get in the house. He was like, we're going to run around to the back. Go on up. And I was like, okay. And I was like, and I wiggled myself up. And I popped up. At the time, I pop up like in the middle of a factory, and I'm freaking out. Turns out it wasn't a factory. It was like a water heater. But again, once again, second grade me. And I popped out like between these, and I'm guessing when they were doing work on the house, they probably left out like a little paneling that went down to the work area, which was dumb because any random animal, small child, could get into your house. And I remember I popped up, and they had, it's hard to see the doors here, but they were like these kind of doors. And so apparently sunlight from a window had come through and then hit the slats and then gone through between those and like somehow perfectly lined up to beckon me in. So I remember I got up, went between the two, I was like, went between the two things, pushed open the two doors, and then they snapped open, and I stepped into the house. And it was like, oh! And I tried to set this up how I remember it. So there were stairs that went above me, and this little area that I was in was like underneath the stairs. If I looked to my left, it went straight to the front door. If I looked to my right, it went into the kitchen, and right up there was like the sliding glass door. There was a wall across from me, we found out later was the garage. And then behind me was like a dining room and a living room. And they were all open, so you could like run around them. I looked to my right, and the fourth grader and my brother were at the sliding glass door, like their little faces pushed up against it. And I'm like, as I walked up to the door, and I'm like, yeah! And I whoop, threw open the door, and they came in. It was awesome. We ran around this house the whole afternoon. Things that we could not do at our house. We were playing tag, hide and go seek. We were throwing things around in there. It was wonderful. Evening time got there, and we were like, all right, let's head back home. So we go ahead and put everything back where we found it. We go out the sliding glass door, shut the gate behind us, head back home. It was great. Next morning, we wake up. Fourth grader comes over, and he was like, hey, you want to go back to the clubhouse? And I'm like, yes, I do. He's like, let's bring toys with us. And I'm like, you're a genius. So we packed up backpacks and put a whole bunch of Transformers, G.I. Joes, and Hot Wheels in there. And we took a whole backpack full of toys over to this house. Now, this was back in the 80s, so back then we didn't have cell phones. You just told your parents, I'm going to go play, and then you would show up at night, and they'd be like, hey, don't get killed, and you're like, probably not today. So that's what we did, and we were gone for the whole day, and we just played in this house the entire day, running around, playing with action figures, and we did this for 3 days. We would wake up, go there, play all day, come home in the evening time. It was great. Day number 4. Again, at this point, we brought out a bag of toys, and I remember exactly where I was when this happened. We were in the kitchen. They had the little linoleum floor, and we were rolling Hot Wheels because we got in trouble at our house because if you roll the Hot Wheels, sometimes it'd make little marks on the linoleum, or sometimes we'd throw them too hard and it'd hit the stove and be like, bang! And my parents would yell at us, but here, we could hit as much stuff as we want, and we did not get yelled at. So we're sitting there rolling Hot Wheels back and forth, and then all of a sudden we hear at the front door. And all of a sudden, we both go, all three of us go flat, like look towards it, and we could see the door, and we could see like little frosted pane glasses. There was someone on the other side of it, and we could hear a voice. And it's like, oh, and we freak out. Smart kids would have run out the glass door that was literally right next to us. That's not what we did. We instead ran deeper into the house because apparently not smart criminals. You're going to see a theme over the next couple of days. And so we ran from here around the corner to here. And so imagine this is the wall where I can go here and it goes into the kitchen, or I can continue down here and it goes like around to the front door. All three of us jump up and run and slam up against this wall. Remember, my younger brother was to my right, the fourth grader was to my left, and there was the edge. And we hear like, we hear the front door like boom. We hear this boom, 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 boom behind us, and then all of a sudden, boom, a whole bunch of heavy stuff being set down, and then a whole bunch of words I'd never heard before from somebody who sounded really angry, and then like toys being kicked everywhere, like, who left the toys all over? And I was like, oh, and all three of us are freaking out, and we can hear him, and he's getting close, like he comes over to the refrigerator, or if he just happened to look to the right, he probably would have seen this, and like, we're going to die. And then all three of us had the same thought at the same time. Ah! And we just, all three of us just screamed at the top of our lungs and turned and ran to the right. Now, being an adult, looking back at this, if I was in a house that I thought was empty, and all of a sudden, 3 feet away from me, I hear screaming and footprint, I would wet myself and then just lay down and call it a day. So, we turn and make a run for the front door. Now, me, being the older brother, naturally, I grabbed my younger brother and threw him behind me so that I could get to the door first, because that's what older brothers do. And I remember I ran through the front door.
Can you not?
Now, I had been opening doors for years at this point. I was like a professional door opener. And I remember I got to the front door, and I would... If you've ever seen the horror movies with the girl who's running from the guy with the axe, and like she can't do like a door, and you're like, what kind of idiot can't... When the monster's behind you, like parts of your brain just don't do the thing they're supposed to. And I remember like holding this door, and I'm like, ah! And the 4th grader was pounding on my back, and I'm like, and all of a sudden I got the door, and I twisted it, and I opened it, and it hit my toes, and then slammed shut. And I had a moment where I was like, the door didn't door. I'm like, doors are supposed to door. And all was like, ah. I mean, it probably took all of 5 seconds, but it felt like we were there for years. Being, again, the smart kids we are, we then shoot out the front door, all heading straight to our houses, because that's what good smart criminals do. 4th grader came out, went that way to his house. My brother and I came out and went this way to our house. Now, my younger brother, being the kindergartner, he was trying to stay on the sidewalk, so I remember him running. And then like as he was running along his little body as he was going
wobbling?
me, because as I opened the door, he had shot past me. It was like a little cannonball, boom, and he went out the door. So he had a little bit of a head start, and then I came out, and I was like, I'm not messing on the sidewalk, I'm taking the grass because it's faster. Remember, I came out and started running down the grass. And I remember I'm sprinting, and like the wind's going through my hair, and I can look to my right, and there's my brother like running along, and we're having like this brother bonding moment, like, we're running, buddy. And he's like, yeah, we are. And as we're going along, I remember him like looking over at me, then like his eyes going behind me, and then his eyes getting big, and then him looking back. I'm like, what's going on? So I look behind, and the guy's right behind me. Like, of all three of us, he could have chosen to chase. He picked me. And so I turned around, and he's like, run. I'm like, oh, and I tried, I'm like, I'm going to go fast. I remember like trees, cars, houses. I'm like, you never got, hand on my shoulder. I'm not even sure I made it out of his yard, but it felt like the fastest I'd ever been running. And I remember I had that cartoon moment where he grabbed me, and I went like that little moment when everything goes in front of you. And I looked at my brother, and he looks at me, and I'm like, keep running. He's like, I'm not stopping. And he just kept on going down the sidewalk. And the guy turned me around, big guy. I mean, again, I was weak. Everything was big. And I looked at him, and I was convinced that he was legally allowed to kill me. So I was prepared that he was getting ready to kill me. So I remember as soon as he turned me around, he was like, who are you? My response was, don't kill me. And he was like, what? And I'm like, please don't kill me. And he was like, you are a strange boy. Now, if you're thinking about this, middle of the day, door opens, 3 small children come running out of it, crying and screaming. Just leave it there, it reminds me. Large man comes out, chases one of those children, and then drags that child back into the house. In the 80s, we called that a Tuesday. Nowadays, like that's the thing that would probably get someone's attention, but back then, wasn't even a blip. So the guy drags me back into the house. And I remember he sat me down on the stairs, and the stairs had the little railing, but it was the one that had like little poles that had the railing. And the only reason I remember that is as soon as he set me down, I remember to make his ability to kill me as tough as possible, I wrapped my arms and legs like a little koala bear, all through those little bars. I was like, ah! I was like, ah! That way he couldn't try to kill me. And I remember he went behind, and I heard him call the police. He's like, doo, doo, doo. He's like, I caught someone breaking into my house. Yes, I have him here now. Yes, I have him in control. Yes, send police officers. And I remember it was like, he's gonna kill me, he's gonna kill me, he's gonna kill me. And then I have no idea how long. Eventually there was a doorbell, and then he goes over and opens it, and the door opened this way. So I couldn't see, but I could hear police officers. And the police officers were like, so you said you have someone who's breaking and entering in your house? Yes, sir. He was like, and you have them here now? And he goes, yes, I do. They go, where is he? And they go, he's on the stairs. And I remember he stepped back, and I'm sitting there clutching these little stair things, and the police officers go, all right, and like they stopped, like looked at me, I was like, huh? And they stepped back, they go, is it the kid? He was like, yes, it is. And they're like, oh my God. And they said like, kid, is this your house? I'm like, oh, I'm like, I remember I said, are you going to kill me? And they're like, no. And I'm like, then I remember I followed up with, who's going to kill me? I was convinced death was coming. It was, but that was my parents' job. And they're like, son, come with us. And they couldn't put handcuffs on me because, again, pipe cleaners would just fallen right off. But they took me to the back of the cop car, and they put me in the cop car. And like, where do you live? And I gave them the address because I remembered because I was a big boy. And they drove me back to my house. Now, I also remember being in this police car for this ride for like a half hour going back to my house. And then when I took my daughters on the tour, I found out house, neighbor's house, my house. Literally, like I remember looking back and I'm like, that can't be possible. I'm like, I was in that car for, nope. Literally, just, and they just drove right over there. So, drove up, and I remember we got out and I had to walk up to the front door, and I remember they had me ring the doorbell, and the two cops are standing behind me. I'm just like, oh. And my mom opened the door, and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, is this your son? She goes, yes, it is. They go, well, we found him in your neighbor's house. And she goes, what? Like, he was breaking and entering with two other kids, and they found out that my brother was one of them. Because again, like a good criminal, I ratted him out immediately. So they went up to go find my brother, who had done what any small child does when monsters come, hid under the bed. And so they literally had to grab my dad had to grab his ankles. And he was like, ah! And they dragged him out from underneath the bed. And then took us down to my family room, and they went and picked up the fourth grader and brought his parents over. And all of us were sitting on these little couches, these ugly brown couches, I still remember. And they're like, you understand what you did is breaking the law. I'm like, oh. They're like, do you understand that we could put the three of you in jail right now? You could be in jail at this. They can't put 8-year-olds in jail. But at 8, I'm like, I didn't know that. I'm like, I don't want to go to jail. I'm like, but at least it's better than death. And I was like, they're like, so then if you ever do anything wrong again, like you understand this goes on your permanent record. If you ever do anything wrong again, you're going to be going to jail with all the big criminals. You're going to have to be good. I'm like, I'm going to be a good kid from now on. And like, all right. And it scared me to death, and it worked. It kept me from getting arrested again for like 7 years. And that was really good. Because I didn't get arrested again until I was a freshman in high school. And so that's the story we're going to get to tomorrow with me being arrested. High school. Tomorrow's story is going to be less, there's a few funny parts, but a lot of it's going to be a bit more sad.
So it did or didn't go on your record?
So you're going to find out tomorrow.
No,
the
elementary.
I know. That's part of tomorrow's story. I can't give it away yet.
Did my Mr. Brovak win?